Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar called The Advanced Test Management Works Even Better with TestComplete and QAComplete. Before we get started, if everybody would let me know that you can hear our voices, just use the Q&A panel just to type in there, just say, yep, can hear you, so that we know that the audio is working just fine. All right, starting to get a lot of yeps, so that sounds good. All right, well, we're ready to get started here. The presenters today, Nick Alibo, he is a senior automation engineer and also a TestComplete expert. You're also in good hands here with yours truly, Steve Miller. I have a little over 26 years of experience with both software development as well as testing, and I'll be presenting the QAComplete portion of the demo for you today. You'll notice that Nick is much better looking than me, but that's okay. Okay, so what all are we going to cover today? Well, first of all, we're going to talk about how the testers can reduce their tester effort and the time that it takes to fully regress software with each one of the releases that you do. We'll also look at how we can ensure that each one of your requirements in a release is fully tested. Next, we'll look at how we can reuse your manual tests from release to release. Then we'll go on and look at how to provide management with both real-time as well as ad hoc testing statistics so that you can see how your testing is progressing. We'll also look at how we can determine what the requirements, tests, and defects have been worked in a specific release. Now we're going to start off today's demo with looking at TestComplete. This is our automated testing tool. Now I know a lot of you already use TestComplete, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but we're going to spend probably about 5 minutes going through it just to show you how to set up an automated test. Once we're done with that, we'll then show you how TestComplete and QAComplete interoperate with each other and how you can look at run statistics inside of QAComplete. We'll also talk about how you can schedule both TestComplete as well as test execute tests from within QAComplete and then see the run statistics in there. Okay, it looks like everybody can hear me fine. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and pop up into TestComplete and show you some of the ways that you can run tests from within TestComplete. For those of you that aren't familiar with TestComplete, it gives you the ability to run and create automated tests. So as you can see here, I have a project suite within TestComplete where I'm doing some testing for this little orders application. And what I've done is I've created a hive here so that I could organize a series of tests. Now, as far as recording tests within TestComplete, it's a fairly simple thing to do. All we really have to do is to go in and record the tests, and you can record those in what we call keyword mode, which means that it'll show you the test in a very easily readable format. I'll just kind of show you what one looks like here. You can see that you can see where we can run an application, we can open up a form, and then we can click on the form, that kind of thing. It also has the ability to store these as scripted tests. So if you prefer programming, you can actually record these as scripted tests and you can go in and update those. And you can even convert keyword tests into scripted tests. So what does one look like once it has been created? I'll just run through one here. Let's say that we have this little orders application and we wanted to run it to add an order. I can come here and just right click on here and it'll actually start the application and it'll take us through the run process here. My hands aren't on the keyboard right now. It's going through and running this particular test. It's going to add an order here. And what we'll see is after the order has been created, it'll then stop the test and it'll write a log file. Now that log file will show you the details line by line, step by step as to what happened. So I'll just kind of come in here and show you what the log file looks like. Log file is that it opens up our application, then it clicks on the File Open command. And the File Open command shows you what this particular command looked like when we recorded it versus when we actually ran it. So you can see side by side with the visualizer all of the screenshots as they were when it was recorded versus when it was last run. So if I continue going on down here, you can see that it has recorded each one of those. All right, so now if you're using TestComplete and our QA tool called QAComplete together, all of the runs that you do from within TestComplete can then be packaged up and shipped over into QAComplete. So how do we make that connectivity? Well, there's a simple download for a plugin, and once you download the plugin, it allows you from within TestComplete to tell it what your QAComplete credentials are. So you can tell it what your email address is, what your password is for logging into the tool, and then you can choose a project that you want the run results to flow into. And then it will also look at a particular directory, either on your hard drive or on some network share, and it'll look for any completed runs, any completed logs, and then it'll ship those over into QAComplete. So how does that look? So let's take a look at it. So what I'll do is I'll bring up QAComplete, and I will go into the test management area, and then I'll come to this area here called automation. And what you'll see is that it's detected that I've actually run those tests twice today. In fact, the one that I just ran was just a second ago at 11:08 or 11:06 Mountain Time, and it'll show you how many tests were in there, how many passed, how many failed, and it'll also show you the duration that it actually took. This one took about 20 seconds to run. Now, an added benefit of this is that not only can you run those from Test Execute or TestComplete and see the run results in here, you can also schedule those to run unattended. So let's imagine that you had to leave work early and maybe go home, pick up the kids or something like that from school. And let's say that once you got home, you thought, wow, I wish I had set up a schedule to run some of these automated tests while I was in the office. I don't have a VPN connection, so I can't easily get into the office, and I don't want to have to drive back to the office. Well, with QAComplete, you really don't have to do that. In fact, all you have to do is come here to the automation scheduler and then create a schedule. To do that, you just press Add, and then you choose a TestComplete as the automation engine. You can then choose a host name. This would be the machine that you want to run it on. So if you had different machines within your organization and you wanted to run on a different machine, maybe you had a lab, you can actually do that. The next thing it'll choose is your project suite from TestComplete and the project. Then you simply tell it what time you want it to run. So let's say that I want this to run at 7 p.m. Tonight. Now, the other thing that you can do is you can set up recurring schedules. So let's say that I also wanted to go ahead and run this Monday through Friday. You can choose that here as well. Now, if you're doing agile development, you may have some time box development, and you may want to stop that run at some particular time. If you wanted to do that, you can actually put an end date in here by choosing it from the calendar. It's not required, but that is an option if you want to do that. Once you do that, just press Submit, and then it'll create that, and it'll automatically run based on the time and the dates that you've set there. So it's very, very simple to do that, and you don't even have to have access directly to the machine that TestComplete or Test Execute is actually running on. Okay, so any questions so far regarding how QAComplete and TestComplete work together? Feel free to use the Q&A panel if you have any questions on that. All right, so popping back over to the spreadsheet here, I'm going to go ahead and show this from here. The PowerPoint here shows the next set of features that I want to introduce here, and that is we're going to talk about how you can use QAComplete not only for that automated test integration, but we're also going to talk about how you can use it to manage releases, how you can manage requirements for a release, how you can begin to organize tests, and how you can create what we call configurations so that you can run your tests on different browsers and operating systems. We'll also talk about defect management. You know, as you begin your test process, most likely you're going to discover some defects, and you'll want to make sure that those get resolved and that those get linked back to the original requirement that they were based on. Then we'll start to drill in a little bit further. We'll look at physically setting up a release, an iteration, or a build. We'll talk about setting up a requirement and linking those back to both releases and tests. We'll talk about how we can reuse those tests and set those up, as I mentioned earlier, for different operating systems and browser configurations. Then we'll introduce you to our run engine. For any of your manual tests, you can organize those into what we call test sets, and then you can run those on a given release and or a given configuration, and it'll report the results of those runs independently for you. And then finally, if there are people in the audience today that's using HP Quality Center and you wanted to move off Quality Center and begin using QAComplete, we have some great news for you. We have a nice little HP Quality Center conversion tool that'll convert all of your artifacts that live in Quality Center into QAComplete. So it'll bring over all of your requirements, it'll bring over your tests, and it'll link those up together if you had them linked over in Quality Center, and it'll also bring over any defects that you have documented inside of Quality Center as well. All right, so let's go ahead and do a quick overview of all of those features, and then I'll keep my eye over here on the Q&A panel, and I'll make sure that any questions that come up along the way that we circle back around and we answer those questions. All right, so let's take a look here at the QAComplete tool. When I log into QAComplete, what we'll notice is there's a series of tabs across the top. The first one's releases, the next one's requirements, then you'll see test management, you'll see defects, you'll see reports, etc. So let's move straight on into this releases area so we can kind of understand how this works. Now, when I'm in the releases area, this is where you can actually physically define your releases, and if you're using Agile, you can also define sprints within a release. If you're using more of a waterfall type environment, you can define releases and sub-releases or iterations. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we can provide organization around the releases. In this example, we have two product lines that we're managing here. We have a contact management system, and if I expand that, I can see that we have a release here with a sub-release. I also have an orders application, which is a different product line, and it has two releases. We have a release 1 and we have a release 2. Now, if I go into release 1, you'll notice that release 1 also has an Agile sprint underneath it. And you may be wondering how we created these releases and these sprints. Well, it's quite simple. Once you've created your release folders, which are normally going to be your product lines, you can go to that product line, press Add, and then it'll prompt you for the information about the release. For example, let's say that we were planning out release 3.0 here of this orders application. We can simply type that in. Next, we can choose a status. And that status is fully configurable by you. You can even wrap workflow around this without doing any scripting. So let's say in this scenario, if we had release 3 here, maybe it's awaiting start, so we set it to that status. And then you can lock in dates. Now, for those of you that use Agile, this will be important to you because you're probably doing time box development. So you can put in a begin date, and then you can put in an end date. Okay, so if I have a 30-day sprint, I may set that up to go for 30 days. Now, if you're using more of a waterfall type development process, you may not want to hard code any dates there. You just may want to have all of the artifacts that come into that release dictate the dates. If that's the case, it's no problem. Simply click that button. It'll then clear out the dates, and it'll automatically calculate that based on the artifacts you put inside of that particular release. Now, the other thing that we have here is something called ownership and assignment. You'll notice that this particular one is has set me as the owner. I could change that if I want. I could also assign that maybe to my project manager. Now, the reason this is important, and you'll see this in requirements and you'll see it in test management as well as defects, but the reason it's really important is that you can get email alerts. So let's say that you're the person physically doing the work. You may set up your assignment alert, which says that anytime an item is assigned to you, you want to receive an email. On the other hand, if you're the manager and you're managing that work, you may want to set up your ownership alert that says anytime I assign something to somebody, if they change it in any way, I'd like for you to send me an email back letting me know exactly what they changed, what date and time they did it, and exactly what they did. Okay. The final thing I want to talk about here is the description. This is where you can describe what's a part of this release. The way I've seen people use this a lot of times is they'll put in maybe the release goals. You know, we want to accomplish this, this, and this with this release. Another way that I've seen this is that people will put in success criteria. We may want to complete this, this, and this, and to measure the success, we're going to ensure that it gets out by this date and that it has no more than a certain number of defects once it hits production. So you can place that type of information here in the description. Now, the interesting thing about that is that we have some really interesting reports that you can run on the back side. So once you're done with the release, you can run what we call a release report. And that release report will show that description. So any of those goals or success criteria will be nicely formatted in that report. That report will also show you a list of all of the requirements that you delivered in that release. It'll show you a list of all the tests that have been run against the release, and it'll link those back to the requirements so that you have, so that you can understand how deeply you tested each one of the requirements. It'll also show you a list of any defects that were discovered during the release as well. So in a bit, I'll show you that report and some additional reports that will allow you to do some analytics. Okay, so one of the other things that you'll see in the tool is right now I'm showing a release. Notice that if I go to a specific release like this release 1.0 here, I can also see here how many artifacts are linked to the release. So I can see for this sprint under release 1, we have 6 requirements that are linked to that specific sprint. I can also see that we've defined 18 tests and we've discovered 6 defects. It also does variance analysis and estimated versus actual hours, so as well as percentage complete. So all of that information is going to be here as well. Okay. Now, in addition to seeing this here in a listing screen, you can also see a dashboard. One of the things that we talked about very early on in the webinar was the ability for you and your management to get real-time statistics as to what's going on in your testing process as well as in the release. And that's exactly what these screens show here. It's showing, for example, release velocity. So I can see day by day how many estimated hours we have in this release, how many estimated hours are still remaining, and I can see how much actual time has been logged against the release. I can also look at resource allocation. This says in this particular release, and you can choose different releases here, that these are the people that are working on the release. And I can see here in blue how many hours of work we've given them, how many hours they've actually logged, and then how much they're reforecasting for, so we can get an idea as to how we're doing there. You'll also see that we can do release burn downs day by day, so those of you that are using Agile will enjoy the ability to see whether you're staying on track based on burn downs. Okay, so that's kind of an overall of how you define a release and how you analyze it. Now let's take a quick look here at requirements. In the requirements area, you can also start to put some structure around those as well. So let's say that you had this little orders application. You see I have 2 product lines, the contact management and the orders application here. Now within this orders application, what I've done is I've subdivided that down by functional area. And all that does is it makes it very easy and simple for you to go out and find requirements that belong to a specific part of your software. So in this orders application here, I can see that I have some batch processing features in the tool, and I can easily see what requirements we have that service that functional area. Likewise, I can come here and look at order maintenance so that I can see any requirements related to adding, editing, and deleting orders, for example. Now, you might have also noticed that I'm really not showing all of the requirements here. I'm only showing the requirements that are in a specific release. Notice right here under release that I'm pointed right now to release 1. Sprint 1. So this is showing me that we have 3 requirements that we're delivering for order maintenance in this particular release. But what if I wanted to see all of my requirements regardless of the release? Well, we can easily do that. Notice over here that there's this little area called Releases right here in the table of contents. And if I click that, that'll show me all of my releases. And you can see that I'm positioned on Sprint 1, which is showing it here. If I take that off, if I come here to the top level here, it's showing me all of my requirements regardless of the release. And notice that the number of requirements shown has greatly increased. Okay? If I want to go back, and by the way, if I go there and then I click on folders, you'll see that now we have 4 requirements here in order maintenance and 4 in order listings. But again, if I go back and reposition myself on this sprint, go back over to the folders, now it's limited it down to these 3. All right, so that's kind of an overview of how you can organize your requirements into a release. All right, so what things can we define about a requirement? Well, we can define quite a few things here. You can see that we have kind of the title of the requirement. You can see that we have assignment and ownership. We talked about how you can get email alerts for that, so that capability is built here into the requirements. You might have also noticed that we have statuses. These statuses, again, are fully configurable by you. All right, and then you can also describe your requirements here. You can also have business rules associated with a requirement. And you can set up configurable workflow around the requirement to ensure that only certain people can approve requirements and it takes it through an approval process. Now, the next thing that testers normally care about is once you have a requirement out there, how do I link up the tests to that requirement to ensure that I have enough test coverage for each one of those requirements? Well, that's pretty simple. Notice down here on the bottom that we have an area called linked items. So I can very clearly see that for this particular requirement here, the add new order screen, I have created 2 tests that I've associated back to that. Okay, and how I did that was I simply pressed this little linked items. I can navigate my test store here. I can look at any particular directory. Maybe I want to link up some of these from my batch processing to this as well. And then you simply choose them. Maybe I want to choose these 5 to link up. You press close here, and now this is linked with all of these 7 different tests here. So very simple to set that up. If you're doing things more in a bulk type situation, you can come here to Traceability, and you can see all of the linked artifacts. And if you wanted to drag and drop a whole lot of those links, you can press this, and then you can navigate your list over here. Maybe I can come here and look at all my tests that are here in the order listings. I can highlight 1 or more of those and then simply drag and drop those right onto the canvas, so you can do that as well. So it makes it very simple to set these links up. All right, now some of the other things that you can see from here, and some of the questions that had come in prior to this was, how do I see traceability? Well, I've shown you your traceability here, but a lot of times you'll want to see a report. And that's fine. There's a little traceability report that I can click here. It'll analyze all of that information. So it'll show me how many releases it's linked to, how many tests it's linked to. If you had any defects here, it would show that, and it graphs that out as well. So all of that information is there. Okay, so once you have a set of requirements, as we can see here, we might want to analyze those in some way. And that's what the dashboard's all about. I'd mentioned earlier that management and you, probably yourself, really needs to understand how many items you have out there, what your test progress looks like against those items. Well, that's where you can come here is in the dashboard to see that. So here I can choose a release, and it's showing me how many requirements we have that are approved, how many are awaiting design, how many are in review, and how many are new. If I want to look at the details of that, I can click into the graph, and then it drills down to a lower level of detail. So I can physically see all of the ones that are approved versus the ones that are awaiting design and the ones that are in review. If I want to click down a little bit lower, I can click on the ID there, and then it pops up the individual details of that particular item as well. So very simple to set that up. All right. Now, in addition to that, we have a number of different traceability graphs that you'll see here. If I slide on down, I'll start to look at test coverage. And that's really important to testers, is ensuring that you have enough tests written for each one of your requirements. So here what I can do is I can pull up a particular release or a particular sprint that I'm working on, and it will show me all of my requirements on the left-hand side, and then it'll show me how many tests have been written alongside of those requirements. So I can find out, how many are approved, how many are awaiting approval, etc. Now, right next door to that, we'll see the run activity against those requirements. So I can see very simply here on the left-hand side that we have a number of different requirements here, and then these are all the number of tests that have been run against it. So this order listing screen here has had 10 tests pass, and it looks like we've had 2 that have failed here. All right. If I want to look a little bit deeper here, I can also come down here and look at how many defects have been discovered by requirement as well. So I can figure out which defects or which requirements were more buggy than others. And then finally I can see percentage complete of each one of my requirements. All right, so that kind of covers the requirements area and the analysis of that. Now let's move on into test management. Okay, now you saw this, I gave you a little bit of a peek of this a little earlier whenever I logged in and showed you how you could run some TestComplete tests, and you could go into this little automation area and see that run activity. And then I also showed you how to schedule tests while you were in this area of the software. One of the other things that you can do here is you can manage your manual tests. Notice there's an area here called Test Library. And the test library can be organized very similarly to the way you did the requirements. Notice that I have my product lines here. I have my contact management system, and I have my orders application. And then I broke that orders application down into more discrete functional areas. So I can see within this orders application that I have some batch processing tests that can run. And I have some for order maintenance. Now what this does is it allows you to start to reuse these tests from release to release. And that was one of the core things that we talked about at the beginning of the webinar is how can I create my tests, reuse those from release to release so that I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. And that's how you do that, is you start to organize them in some way that makes sense to you so that once you get ready to start your next release, you can take some of these and reuse those from a regression perspective when it comes to running those in this upcoming release. All right, so what does a specific test look like? Well, let's drill into one of these. Let's say that we had an edit order test here. Well, first of all, you can see that we can describe the test. You can also see that we can prioritize it. This one, and these are fully configurable by you. You can also have design statuses, so if you wanted to take your manual test and have somebody approve them before you actually run them, that's very simple to set up, no problem there. You'll also notice that it'll show you who last run the test. It'll show you what the status of the last run was, whether it passed or failed or was blocked. It'll also show you the average run time. It says on average this test takes about 17 seconds to run. So you may be wondering, well, how did it know that, and do you track every individual run that happens on a specific test? Answer, that's absolutely. Notice this little Run History tab here. If I go into this tab, it'll show you every time this specific test is run. You can see what release and sprint it ran in. You can see what configuration you ran under. So if you're running with different browsers and operating systems, you can see that. You can see whether they passed or failed. You can also see how long they took to run, and that's where that average is derived, is from this run time. Now, with every test, you're probably going to have a series of steps that the tester is going to go through to ensure that the test passes. That's where the test steps screen comes in. Notice here that we have steps defined, and we have expected results defined here. So this says that to run this particular test, we're going to click on this, and this is what should happen. Then we're going to change this. This is what should happen. Okay. Now, defining these steps and expected results are very simple. You just get into edit mode here, very simple, and you just tab into here, and then you can tab between each one of these. Very simple to do. When you get to the very last one in here, it'll open up a new row at the end, so you don't have to worry about clicking to do that. You can also pull steps from existing test cases. Notice that over here I can browse my set of test cases. I can click into any of those steps and just drag and drop them on the canvas anywhere I want. If I want to rearrange them, I can drag and drop them around. If I want to then delete particular steps, I can very easily do that as well. So very simple to set that up. All right, so that's how you define a reusable test. All right, I won't change that. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is configurations. Now, my guess is there's many of you out there that's doing web development, and you're probably, if you're doing web development, you probably need to run your test under different browsers and different operating systems. And you may want to be able to go back and analyze that later on and say, well, I wonder how many tests I've run under IA7 versus IA9 versus Firefox 7. Well, you can very easily set those configurations up in the tool. To do that, you simply click on the little configurations button here. The Configurations button will show you all of the configurations you've defined. And in fact, one of the ways that I like to do it is I actually like to put some organization around this. So I might separate my mobile configurations here for iPhone and Android, or maybe my Windows 7 configurations versus my Windows XP configurations. So adding a configuration is simple. You just press the Add New button just like we have in the rest of the software. All right, now, once you have configuration set up and you have a test library set up, you can then begin running tests. Now, running tests can be done by grouping them into test suites and then test sets within a suite. Notice here on the left-hand side that I have a couple of test suites. I have one here for our contact management system, one for our orders application. Within the order application, you'll see that I've created some test suites for functional testing as well as regression testing. Now, if I look at the individual test set, I'll just drill into this one here. It's very similar to what we saw over on the reusable test, where you can describe the test set. You can also have design statuses as we did before, so if you wanted certain people to approve the development of your test sets, you can easily do that. You can have assignment and ownership, just like we talked about before, so that you can generate email alerts. And you can describe any of your the test set in general here. Now, I'd also mentioned and hinted that you can reuse these test sets in different releases, and you can run those, set those to run under different configurations. If I scroll to the bottom, this is where you set that up. You can see that this one is set to run in this release and this sprint, and it's also set to run in these 4 configurations. So if I wanted to add some additional configurations, I would just press that little Link to Items button. It'll give me a pop-up. I can select the configurations, and that's really all there is to it. Very simple to do that. All right. So how did I get the tests that we're going to run inside of this test set, the smoke test? Well, there's a test tab here. Here we have 4 tests that we're going to run, and this is the order in which we're going to run them. If I wanted to add more tests here, you just press Add Edit Test here. You simply navigate your library here, and you can highlight one or more here and just drag and drop them right onto the canvas. All right, so very simple to do that. You can also resequence your test, so if you wanted this test to go after that one, you can just drag and drop it down. If you want to change that back, you can drag and drop again. You can also choose what we call Stop on Failure. That says if I have a series of tests that I'm running in a test set, and I get to one that is really critical, like that one, for example, and it fails, I want to block everything below it. Very simple to do. You just press that button. It'll ensure that that one passes. If it doesn't pass, it'll then block everything below it. All right, so that's basically all there is to those tests there. Okay, so let's say that we wanted to run some tests. How would we do it? Well, first of all, you simply go to the test set and you press the Run button. We'll press the Run Now button, okay? And what this will do is it'll first show you here it'll allow you to choose what release you want to run it and what sprint you want to run it under. And if you've only set it up to run in one particular sprint or release, then it'll automatically select that. It'll also show you all of the configurations that you've defined to run this under. So this one's going to be run under i9, Firefox 7, i7, 8, etc. If it has run before in this particular test set, it'll tell you the last time it was run and then who ran it. So let's say that we wanted to run these tests here in Firefox 7. I can easily do that by just choosing Firefox 7 from the list here. Okay. Once we do that, it'll then show me all of the tests that live inside of this test set. So I can very easily see here that we have several tests here. We have creating a new order with valid data, with bad data. We're going to edit some orders and delete some orders. This is another convenient thing. It'll show you how long it took to run on average in the past. So I can see that these sets of tests normally take about 1 minute and 23 seconds to run. To begin the run, you simply press the Run button, and it takes you into run mode. Now, when I'm in the run mode, it'll show me the overall information about the test. You can see that this one's the test to create a new order with valid data. And then I can click on any one of these and then go through and start running the test. As I'm running that test, I can then pass the step by just pressing Pass Step. You'll see a little check mark appears, and then it takes me on automatically to the next step. You can see down here the expected result is shown. If I wanted to record some actual results here, I can very easily do that as well. If I go through the entire test here, but I don't want to click one by one here, I can do pass all steps, and it'll pass all of the steps, and then I can move on to the next test. Now let's say that I start running this test and I have some questions about the requirement, because I can see that this particular test is linked back to this add new order screen requirement. And I may have some clarifications on the requirement. Well, while I'm in run mode, I can actually click that, and it'll bring up the requirement right over here, so I can look at that side by side while I'm doing the testing, so I can start to understand what that requirement's all about. So that makes it very simple to set up. I can go ahead and close that, and I can move on to the next test. If everything works fine in this test, I can mark all of those as passed, move it on to the next test of the series. Now let's say that I have an issue. Let's say that I get down here and a particular test fails. Maybe I get down to here and I want to fail this particular test here, so I've marked that as failed. All right, I can very easily do that. And when I do that, I can also record here what actually happened. So I could type in and say, maybe it did not validate the expiration date of the credit card. Okay, but for me, I like to actually show the developer what happened rather than telling them what happened. So to do that, we can use another tool that's a third-party tool called Jing to allow us to record a test. So let's go through that. So we'll bring up the application that's under test right here, and we'll use Jing. It looks like a little sun at the top of my screen here, and this is a free tool that integrates with our tool. So we'll go ahead and capture a movie that shows exactly what happened when this failure happened. So I'll go ahead and tell it to capture the video. It'll record my voice here as well. And then I will go ahead and jump through this. So it says go in here, you open up this, you go here and you're editing the existing one. I go in and put in a bogus credit card number here, press OK. It allowed me to do it. It shouldn't have, so that's really the error. I can then stop the recording and it'll produce a movie for me. Then I can take that movie and simply upload it to my FTP site by pressing that button there called FTP. And that'll go ahead and upload that movie to my FTP site. Then I can come here and say, see this movie, right-click, choose paste, and lo and behold, there's the movie that actually that I recorded a second ago to show the developer what happened as I was failing that test. Once I'm done, I just move on to the next test. Now when I do this, it detects that I actually failed the test, and it says, hey, you just failed the test. Would you like to go ahead and create a defect for me? Sure, why not? I press yes here, and it'll automatically pop up a defect. I don't have to do that manually. Then I can come here and tell it that this is part of the orders application. I may want to prioritize it. But notice that it has filled in all of my steps to reproduce here, and it even included a copy of the movie that I created showing the developer what happened. Once I press submit, it then routes that on out to the developer to let them work on it. It also links that defect back to the test that was run, back to the test set that was run, back to the configuration that was run, and back to the requirement that it was based on. So you get full traceability without having to do any work there. Okay? If everything looks good on this test, I can go ahead and pass it and finish out my test. Once I'm done, what it's going to do is it's going to show me a complete history of what just happened. So this is showing me here that every test that ran, which ones passed, which ones failed. It also shows me how long it took to run on average versus today. Today it took about 4 minutes. In the past it's taken about 1 minute. Now, again, whenever we were talking about earlier, we talked about the ability for your management and yourself to analyze those runs. Well, we can do that by coming over here to the dashboard. And the dashboard is going to show me how many tests we have for each one of these requirements, and then how many passed, how many failed. I can also look at that by test set, so I can see how many smoke tests I'm running versus functional tests, for example. I can also scroll down and look at it by configuration, so I can see that I'm running more on Firefox than I am on any other browser. So that gives me that information right there very clearly. From a test design perspective, I can also go in and analyze the test library. I can figure out how many tests have been created by the different testers here, and I can also look at the traceability back to the individual requirement as well. So all of that information is stored there nicely for you. All right. Now, another thing that you can do is you saw that I was able to create a defect over while we were doing the testing. You can also create defects manually. I can come to the defect section and I can go into any folder here and I can create a defect. Maybe I want to add a defect to my backlog for the orders application. To do that, I just press add, fill in the details of the defect. It automatically selects it and saves that information. And then, of course, as I'm adding all of these defects, I can at any time go over to my dashboard, figure out how many defects I have by status here. I'll just turn my grouping off here. I can look at them by priority. I can trend them out day by day. I can look at them linked back to the requirement, and I can also look at them by assignee. Now, one of the things that were asked a little bit earlier, I was looking at the Q&A panel here, was, well, what if I'm using another defect tracking system, maybe like Team Foundation Server or Jira or something like that? Can I utilize that and utilize your tool as well? Yeah, absolutely. We have integrations with probably 13 or 14 different ALM tools, and certainly TFS is one of them, Bugzilla is another, Quality Center is another, Jira is another, and the way it works is you can do either a one-way or a two-way synchronization that says if I create a defect over in QAComplete, I want it to route over to TFS, for example. Or if I create it over in TFS, I want it to route over to QAComplete. And then any updates done on either side would then update the other side. No problem with that. We have the capability to do that. That's not a problem. All right, so that's kind of an overview of how you set releases up, how you set requirements up, how you set tests up to be reusable, and how you manage the defect side of it. Now, I showed you a lot from a reporting perspective on the dashboarding side, but I also want to let you to know that we have a number of different reports that you can run as well. Notice there's a reports section here. Some of the typical type reports that I see testers really interested in is things like, let me see all of my automated test runs. I can click here and it'll give me a nice little report that shows that. Any requirements that are missing tests, for example, if you're developing a number of tests for different requirements on a release, you want to make sure that you're not missing any of your requirements. You can run that and it'll show you what requirements you haven't defined any tests for. So that can be very helpful. Traceability matrices, they can be helpful. That'll show you for every requirement how many tests have been created, how many have been run, how many defects have been discovered. You can also look at things like test coverage by requirement. Let's look at that. I'll just run this one real quick, just kind of show you what these reports look like. The first thing it'll do is it'll prompt you for some additional information. Do you want to run it across all your projects or just the current project, etc. Once you run it, it'll then produce a report for you, and normally these reports are pretty graphical. They'll have usually some graphs at the very beginning, and then that's followed by some detail. In this example, I'm looking at all of my requirements on the left-hand side here and all of the tests that have been run, so I can see how many are awaiting run, how many have been passed, how many have been failed. And then over at the very top right over in this area over here, it gives you the bird's eye view. So it says, okay, this is how many tests have been run by requirement, but this is more of the bird's eye view of this release. How many have passed for this release, how many failed, how many are awaiting run. Now, the next logical question is, can you show me some of the details that make those numbers up? And you just page on. It'll show you each requirement, what configurations of tests you're running, how many tests you have in there. You can continue paging in here, and this will show you when they've been run, who they've been run by, whether they passed or failed, and it's color-coded to show you that. One of the additional things that you can do with this is you can also export this data. So if you want to export this out to PDF, Excel, Word, or rich text format, or even XML, you have the capability to do that. Okay, so this is kind of the overview of the things that I wanted to talk with you today about, and I'm going to get to your questions in just a second. I just want to summarize real quick what we talked about today. First of all, we talked about TestComplete and how you can use it to automate your tests. and how testers can save time by doing that, as far as rerunning tests that have already been invested in the time of automating them. We also looked at QAComplete, and we saw how we could create requirements. We saw how we were able to link tests up to the requirements to ensure that you have full test coverage. We looked at how we could reuse those manual tests by organizing them by product line and by functional area. We looked at how we could share the test results with team members with all of our dashboards and our reports. We looked at how you can do release reporting through all the dashboards, and then we talked about utilizing Jing to reduce bug rework by not having to type out a lot of steps to reproduce. Instead, you can create a movie, place that into the test run, and then automatically generate the defect with that linked artifact right there. All right, so that's kind of an overview there. If you like what you saw today, you can download both QAComplete and TestComplete at no cost for 30 days out at SmartBear.com. So now let's go ahead and get to the questions here. All right, so the first one says, is QAComplete's test run automation supplemental to TestComplete's existing network suite? That was by Greg. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, so Greg, you can still use the network suite idea in TestComplete. You can use it just as you do today. And as you run those, if you have the plug-in with QAComplete, all of that run activity will report back into QAComplete so that you can see that run activity and share it with others on your team. So the real big benefit there, Greg, is that not only can you see what happened, your entire team member, all of the team members that you give rights to this area can see that run activity. So that's what makes that special, is that everybody can get access to that run activity. All right. So Frank says, how can we get the plug-in for the Softwareplanner registration? Good question, Frank. What you can do, Frank, is you can go out to the SmartBear site, which I'll do here. I'll just go out to SmartBear.com, press on QAComplete, okay, press on Learn More, and then there's an area here that has all of our feature videos on it. The feature video page is really good, by the way. It's got it has little videos that show you how all the features of the tool works. And if I slide down to the very bottom here, there's a download center, and that download center has the TestComplete automation bridge download right there. And what I'll do here is I'll also paste that here into the GoToMeeting chat window here so that everybody has a direct link to that. So very good question there. All right. Robert says, did you say that you can collect the data from test execute when the files are located somewhere on the network without it actually running the test via the scheduling? Yeah, Robert, absolutely. So as long as you have the plugin installed, Robert, when I was over in TestComplete a little bit early, I'll just show you real quick. When you register it here, you have the capability called Use Remote Data right there. If that is checked and you have, let's say, a network share here, okay, where you're putting all of your run results, it'll pull that directory looking for any runs that happen, and it doesn't have to be something that was scheduled over in QAComplete. If you run it manually there, or if you have some script that runs it, doesn't matter. It'll pick those log files up. It'll ship those over to QAComplete automatically without you having to do anything. So that's a good question. All right. Next question says, when scheduling a test run on a Windows machine, will the scripts run if the test machine is locked? That was Gary. Gary, that will not work. You do have to have the machine unlocked. We haven't figured a way around that yet. So what we recommend is that you use a machine that's not used by others, maybe a virtual machine or something like that, and you just leave that unlocked. So good question there. Okay, so Robert says, by files, I meant the output files from test execute. Sorry for the confusion. Yeah, Robert, so not only does it show you that the run has happened, over in QAComplete, when it logs that run activity over here in test management, I'll just come over here and show you real quick. Go to automation. When it runs these, it will actually send the log file itself up to QAComplete, and if you click on the run activity, it'll actually go out there and read that MHT file that you're probably used to over in TestComplete, and you can see all of the stuff that you can see there. So you can come in here and look at For example, the visualizer screenshots, all that kind of stuff that you can see over in TestComplete, you can see directly here from QAComplete because it does store the log there as well. It's a good question there. All right. So Michael says, is QAComplete a kind of quality center, kind of like Quality Center? Can we customize some of the fields according to the client needs? Yeah, Michael, great question. So QAComplete would be a replacement for Quality Center. The good news is that the cost of QAComplete is about 20% of what Quality Center costs. So this gives you a really good alternative for Quality Center if you've been using that in the past. You'll also find that I think our support is a lot better. Normally, if you have an issue or a question, you'll get an answer from us within about 2 hours of submitting a support ticket. If you've worked with HP Quality Center, you've probably been frustrated with the support level. So that's one of the things that you don't have to worry about. As far as configurability, can you create your own custom fields? Absolutely. In fact, if I go here to my test library, for example, and I look at one of these test cases that I've created, this one here, and I wanted to add some additional fields on this screen, no problem. There's a little button here called Custom Fields. For every screen, you can define up to 90 custom fields. If I scroll down here, you'll see there's 90 of those, all right? And you can make different field types like check boxes, list of values, dates, numeric phone numbers, social security numbers, text fields, lots of different ways to do that. You also have a little bit easier way to reorganize these screens. If you've used Quality Center, you've probably experienced that you have to do some scripting to do workflow and that kind of thing. You don't with our tool. It has a visual workflow editor in it over here in the choice list area. So rather than having to do a lot of scripting, we have the ability to define workflow graphically here. And it also gives the ability to reorganize your screen so that certain fields appear in certain orders and that kind of thing. So I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised with what we have here for that. So. All right. Next question here is from Liz. It says, is this tool, can it be connected or linked to Microsoft Team Foundation Server? Yeah, Liz, it can. I talked a little bit about that earlier. You can do a couple of things with Team Foundation Server. First of all, let's say that you have developers and they refuse to use another tool for defect management. It's okay. Let them use Team Foundation Server for managing user stories and or defects, and just set up a synchronization. It'll bring those artifacts over into QAComplete once you have that linked up. Now, another common use that I've seen with not only Team Foundation Server, but also Subversion and Perforce and some of these other source control tools, is that a lot of times you'll want to link source code to artifacts inside of QAComplete. Like maybe you fix a bug and you want to link it to the source code that you fixed. Or maybe you want to link it back to the requirement that you wrote the code for. You can do that as well. And whenever you check your code in Team Foundation Server in that example, you can very easily say, I want to link this to these 3 defects and these 2 requirements, and it'll establish that linkage. It'll also give you graphs that show how many defects have been discovered by source code and that kind of stuff. So lots of good information there. Good question. Okay, so John says, can you import existing tests into test management from something like Excel spreadsheets? Good question, John. Yeah, so John, all you have to do is come over here to the test library, and when you get there, there's this little area under Actions called Import. And you just take your Excel spreadsheet, you save it as a comma-separated file, choose that. You choose your comma-separated file from your hard drive. I'll just kind of choose one here just to kind of show you what it looks like. I've got one here in my demo directory. All right, so we'll come here under here, and then we'll choose tests. All right. Once you do that, you press next. It'll read the file, and it'll give you a preview of what that file looks like. It'll show you all your columns in your spreadsheet, and then it'll automatically map the fields if you put those as if you name the fields in the first row of the spreadsheet. And then you just press import and it'll import those. And it can handle doing it where you have all of your steps in one row or your steps separately in different rows of the comma-separated file. Either one of those will work. You just have to toggle a switch as to which one you want to use. Okay. Luke says, are those configuration simulated environments? You're talking about the configurations area over here in test management. And you're saying, are those simulated environments? This is where you're really just defining the types of things you're testing on from a manual perspective, and you're kind of linking that up to the sets of tests that you're running so that you can, as you run it, it'll record what configuration you were running under as you were going through the test. So that's what that's used for, Luke. All right. Other questions here. Pamela says, what version are you demoing? On the TestComplete side, that was version 8.5. There's a newer version out there, 8.6, but I just haven't downloaded that yet. On the QAComplete side, it's QAComplete 2011, Pamela. Good question. All right. Marin says, how is Test Runner connected to Test Suites in TestComplete? Not quite. Let's see. Is it somehow connected to? Okay, yeah. So your question is, can you set up your tests that you developed over in TestComplete and run those under Test Execute? That was your, Marin, that was your question. Answer to that's yes. Once you develop your test in TestComplete, you can have Test Execute running on any lab machine, right? And you can have it reading the test that you created with TestComplete. And then as you run that, if you have the plug-in between TestComplete and QAComplete, all of those run results will automatically flow over. That's not a problem. All right. Ricardo says, can you pause a test and then re-continue the next day or continue other tests? Yeah, that's a good question. So I think what Ricardo is saying is, let's say that I'm running a set of tests here. I'll just come here to my test sets, and I'll start a test here. All right, so I'll run this one. Okay. When I get into run mode here, I'll choose one of these. Maybe I'll run this under IE7. And let's say, first of all, when we begin the run, that I start going through this, I start passing some of these, and then I get a phone call. All right. And then I want to just pause it temporarily because I want to take the phone call. Well, notice right up here at the top right, I'll highlight this for you. It's timing my run here, right? And I can actually pause that by just pressing the pause button. So notice that that timer just stopped. So I can take the phone call, and then when I'm done with the phone call, I can then come back down here, press start, and then that timer will start again. All right, and then I can pass this and move on to the next one. Now, let's say that the second scenario is that I've run through, let's say I get through, a couple of these tests. Maybe I get down here to test 3, I get down to test 4, and I go, oh man, it's the end of the day, I need to go home. I may want to pause it for the day. To do that, you just press the end run button, and it'll ask you what do you want to do. And it says, oh, do I want to mark this pause so that I can resume it later? Or do I want to mark it paused and blocked? Or maybe I just want to bail on this test altogether and mark it as failed or incomplete or something like that. I have that choice. In that case, I could just say, I want to pause this for tomorrow, press OK. It'll go ahead and stop the run, and it'll mark that run here as paused. So I can then resume that test tomorrow. So see, it's now paused here. Tomorrow, when I come back in here and I press run, it'll start me where I left off from today. So good question, Ricardo. All right. Other questions here by Greg says, do we integrate with fog bugs? Greg, we don't integrate with fog bugs at this time. And somebody else asked about on time. Do we integrate with on time? We don't. Neither one of those. But we do integrate with JIRA, with Team Foundation Server, Quality Center, Rally version 1, Team Foundation Server, Rational Team Concert, Accept 360, CVS, Perforce. There's probably about 15 that we integrate with. Unfortunately, those 2 that you asked about, we don't. Now, we do have an integrations team that can do that for you with professional services if you need it, but we don't have a out-of-the-box integrator there. All right. So Rajani says, when I automate a login screen, record the script, and run the script, I get an error message that it did not find the object, not recognize the text box. Should I automate the login screen? How should I automate the login screen? My browser is Internet Explorer 9.0. Yeah, so Rajani, what we'd want to do is we'd want you to work with the support team, and the support team will look at that issue that you're having, and they'll help you resolve it. So if you don't mind entering a support ticket, we'll take care of that, and I'll have our TestComplete sales engineer review this afterwards and get back in touch with you. Okay, so Gustavi says, into what formats can the reports be exported? They can be exported to Excel, to Microsoft Word, to PDF, rich text format, as well as XML. Good question there. All right. So Baba says, must programmers also have access to QAComplete in order to use the software fully? Baba, not really. If the developers want to use the tool that they use today, like Team Foundation Server, to enter defects and resolve defects, as long as you have the integration between the two tools, they can continue using that. If they want to use QAComplete, they certainly can use it. Okay, so Wade says, can tests be imported into the test library from Excel? We talked about that a little earlier. You can do that. Can we import into XLS, Word documents or other formats? Yeah, so Wade, we really have two options to getting data into the test management area. One is through Excel spreadsheet saved as a comma separated file. The other is through XML. You can use our Web Services API to import through that Web Services API. So if you want to do it programmatically by reading your SQL store and then using our Web Services to import to insert those records, you can do it that way, or via XML or whatever transport you want to use there. John says, is QAComplete a more expensive product than TestComplete? Actually, it's less expensive than TestComplete. Good question there. QAComplete, if we go over to the website here, I'll just go here into TestComplete, or I'm sorry, QAComplete. If I go into QAComplete and I look at pricing here, we have two versions of TestComplete that we offer. We have what we call in the cloud, the SaaS model, where you don't have to have any hardware. You can just you can run these in the cloud. The other is what we call a perpetual license, where it is installed locally on your own server. So you have the choice there. The difference in pricing is that the software as a service is a yearly fee per user. So let's say that you had 10 users. It would be $399 per user. So if you multiply that by 10 users would be $3,990 per year if you're looking at the software as a service with named licenses. If you're looking at concurrent licenses, meaning that you can add as many people as you like, but only a certain number of people can be connected concurrently, it would be $549 per user per year for the SaaS model. The perpetual model is a one-time fee. So if you had 10 users for perpetual that were named, it would be $899 times 10, $8,990. It's a one-time fee. The first year of maintenance is absolutely free. So you get new versions of the product for the first year, and you get any upgrades that we do, as well as full support. After the first year, if you want to stay on maintenance, there's a 20% annual maintenance fee for the perpetual license. So it's a little less expensive than TestComplete. Okay, Greg says, Greg liked the fact that as we're running these TestComplete tests and it stores them inside of QAComplete, it stores the log. Greg likes that. He was smiling there, saying he likes it because it's a central place to organize your logs. That's good. Supriya says, can we transfer data from test management tools, TCM, into QAComplete? Also, can we do the same Bugzilla to QAComplete? Yeah, so we do have an integration with Bugzilla, so you can have any defects that you have in Bugzilla, and you can synchronize. With Test Management Tool, TCM, I'm not familiar with that tool, but if you can export out of that tool into a comma separated file, you can certainly import that data into our tool. That's not a problem. Ricardo says, when you're executing a test, can you pause the test? Yep, we talked about that. Let's see here. Okay, John says, is there any integration for QAComplete with tools like Hudson and Jinkins? For those of you that aren't familiar with Hudson and Cruise Control and those types of tools, those are all build tools. So, for example, if you're doing agile development and people check in code, you can use Hudson to detect that the code was checked in, and then it can do a complete build of your software and ship that over onto a server so that your testers can then test it. So yeah, we don't have a direct integration with those tools, but you can do it easily. and that is tools like Hudson and Cruise Control and Automated Build Studio, which is our build management tool, can call out to any other tools. And so, for example, a common scenario that I've seen is somebody checks code into Hudson, and then they want to run a series of automated tests to ensure that the code check-in that they just didn't break their code. So what they'll do is they'll use Hudson to call out to, let's say, TestComplete, and run a series of tests and automated tests in TestComplete. And because TestComplete's now talking back to QAComplete, you'll be able to see that check-in run of the test back inside of QAComplete, because it will have inspected the run activity, and it'll even include the log there. So that's a good question. All right. All right, next question here is from Supriya. Says, can we transfer data from test management? Oh, we already talked about that. Greg says, you can create an RDP session. Can you create an RDP session to the host running TestComplete or TestExecute, then set up? Oh, okay. Greg's telling us how you could, I think he's saying how we can unlock the test. Greg, give me some more information about that. You mentioned that you can create an RDP session by setting up a key in the registry. Shoot me an email with that, a little bit more information with that, Greg. That'd be great to understand what you're talking about there. It sounds like you're onto something good there that I want to learn more about. So that's in regards to unlocking the desktop, I believe. If you'd share that with us, that'd be really great. Just send that over to steve.miller@smartbear.com, and I'll try and do a blog on that so that we can get others to learn from your experience. So that's good. Okay, David says, for automated testing, how are releases tied to the actual builds that are run automatically? The automated testing, David, isn't linked back to the release per se, because only the manual tests were, so they don't actually show up there. That's true today, but we're actually working on our next release of QAComplete where that's not going to be the case. You're going to be able to link your automated tests back to specific releases, and we're going to have some other very interesting features in that I can't really disclose right now, but that's coming out pretty soon. Okay, Ann says, is it possible to see and link my automated keyword test as test inside the test library of QAComplete? That's really the same question that David just asked, is linking those artifacts together isn't capable. You're not able to do it today, but in our next major release you will be able to do that. Okay, Gary says, can we integrate with OnTime? We talked about that earlier. We don't have an OnTime integration. Rajani says, do you have user manuals about how to import test scripts? Yeah, in fact, if you're inside of QAComplete, there's a little help center right here. And if I go to the help center, there's a little area here called feature movies. If you click on the feature movies, it takes you to this page that I was showing you a little earlier. And one of the options here is import data, which is a movie. You click on that, and it not only will tell you how to do it, it'll show you how to do it. So hopefully you can use that. Okay, so Wade says, can manual tests created in TestComplete be imported into QAComplete and vice versa? Yeah, we talked about import earlier. All right, looks like I've answered a lot of these. Scrolling on down here. Perla wants to know if she can create her tests in TestLink and import those. TestLink, from my understanding, Perla, keeps all of your test information in XML format. You can use our API to import that data. I think one of our partners has actually worked on a TestLink import. If you want more information about that, Perla, I'll try and hook you up with one of those partners that has talked about that in the past. Just shoot me over an email at steve.miller@smartbear.com, and I'll send you that information. Ricardo says, can you integrate with CDS and Team Foundation Server? Yes, on both. How about Harvest CA? No, we don't have an integration with Harvest. And how about Visher Requirement Tool? No, Ricardo, we don't have an integration with that one at this time. Marin says, is QAComplete actually replacing TestComplete and TestExecute? I mean, if test can be defined and run from here without TestComplete and TestExecute. No, Marin, it doesn't replace those. It simply works with those, in conjunction with those. So you'd still need either TestComplete or TestExecute to run the tests. It'll simply ship that over into QAComplete so that you can do analysis on it. Okay, the next question is, if tests are executed on another machine and the network of that machine disconnects, what result will QAComplete show? I'm not quite sure on that. I believe what it'll show is that that test has been stopped, I think, but I will have to double check on that for you. All right, the next one is, can tests recorded in TestComplete for Internet Explorer 8 or 9 be converted to a test for Firefox? Yes, my understanding is that you can. There's some strategies for reusing tests for the different browsers, and if you want, we'll have one of our account personnel send you over some information on that. The next one says, can we integrate version 1 requirements with QAComplete? Absolutely. Yes, you can do that. Just a few more tests here. It says TestComplete and QAComplete seems to be TestComplete and QAComplete to use QAComplete. Not sure what that meant. Let's see here. Next question here says, okay, John says, what benefits do you get from coding scripts in TestComplete from scratch rather than doing the keyword scripts? John, it just gives you, if you're comfortable with coding, if you're comfortable with VB script or C script or JavaScript or any of the other scripting languages that we support, it gives you the capability to do that. A lot of people, like conditionals and that kind of thing, and it makes it easy to write the code. They can write the code very easily like that. Then there's other testers that are a little intimidated with coding, so they prefer, more of a graphical keyword type test. So totally up to you. It's really what you want to do there. There's probably some, either way, I think you can still get the same level of power either way, but it just gives you another way of doing it. Okay, Greg said he missed my email, steve.miller@smartbear.com, steve.miller@smartbear.com. Okay, Luke says, okay, so Luke says, sort of off subject, but are there other websites or documents that will help a user define regression, requirement testing, regards to automation versus manually? Right now we're going into a requirements testing, and most part we test them, but you're basically just looking for some best practices. Luke, we actually have a CBT class really specified for that. It talks about best practices for testing. That CBT class is the $300. You can have unlimited people use it in your organization for 60 days. And it talks about best practices for doing manual testing versus automated testing and when you'd want to employ one versus the other. So that might be something that could be helpful for you. Okay, let's see here. A couple more questions coming through. And if anybody wants to drop off, feel free to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and go through the questions to make sure that I answer everything for everybody. There's only a few more here. It says, can QAComplete be integrated with top team requirements management software? I'm not familiar with that tool, so I think the answer to that would be no. We don't have an out-of-the-box integration with that. Is there any chance that TestComplete 8 or 9 will add the ability to convert scripts to JavaScript? It already has that capability, so you can right-click on any keyword script and you can convert that to JavaScript. Oh, you're saying JavaScript versus JScript. Okay, that's something I would have to ask the development team about, Greg, so I'll have to get back with you on that. Luke says, can you tell me more about the CBT classes? Absolutely. If you go out to SmartBear and you click on QAComplete, you'll see a little area here called Services. All right, and you'll see that we have a number of different classes. The one that I was talking about is called Test Case Training, and CBT meaning computer-based training. It means that it's not instructor-led. You can watch the CBT training class and kind of go through that, and you'll see all the topics that are a part of that training class right here. So all of that's available to you there. Greg says, will this webinar be available after this session? I love going back through these webinars. Yeah, Greg, absolutely. We're recording today's session, so we'll be making that available to all the attendees. All right, let's see. What kind of application is required to install QAComplete if you install it locally? That's another great question. QAComplete, we have the requirements for that. It's on the website. If you go to QAComplete and click Pricing, scroll down here, there's a little system requirements here. So it's basically runs on Windows Server 2008, either 32 or 64-bit. It requires also a Microsoft SQL Server, so you can use SQL Server 2005, 2008, or SQL Express Edition if you prefer. All right. Okay, so the next question says, can you comment on the plan for TestComplete's Windows 8 support? Bing is asking that. Nick, I'm not sure if your audio is working anymore. If not, you can type into the answer sheet there, or either chat directly to me on the question for that, because I'm just not I don't know the answer to that one. If for some reason we don't get that to Bing, what we'll do is we'll follow up this meeting and give you the answer to that. I just don't know the answer to it. All right. All right. Well, I think that concludes all the questions. Believe it or not, we got through all those questions. I appreciate the people that stayed around for the remaining of this. Now, I'd mentioned a little bit earlier that this particular, both of these pieces of software is available as a trial. So if you wanted to download either TestComplete or QAComplete, just navigate out to smartbear.com. There's a 30-day trial for both of the products, so feel free to download that and try it in your own organization. All right. So any other questions before we close out today? Okay. Greg has a question about the ability to support Firefox 7. I think, Greg, I think Firefox 7 is now supported. If not, I'll get back with you and let you know that. Looks like everybody's saying nope, nope, nope. Everything looks good. All right, great. Well, I appreciate everybody's time today. Hopefully this was helpful for you. At the end of this webinar, it'll ask you a few questions in the survey. If you don't mind filling out that survey, that really helps us understand what we did well and the things that we need to work on for future webinars, and we do appreciate everybody's time. Everybody have a great day.